Hello, hello. Such an exciting time that we just had at our most recent strategy share out, where we dove into thinking about 3 steps towards helping our students analyze and interpret data, be it in school tomorrow, like in our lessons tomorrow, in our next unit, before those upcoming state tests, next year as we're going forward. And I just want to quickly sort of distill down what are the key takeaways that we talked about. So, why do this work? Well, honestly, we hear from the hundreds of thousands of teachers that we work with across this country almost on a weekly basis these really common data struggles. The students don't get it with graphs or patterns, that students need lots of hand holding with their CERs. Even when we hand hold, they still can't do it. Or some of our students seem to get it and others don't, or some get it one week and they don't seem to get it the next week, and we can't really figure out the rhyme or reason to it. So we talked about 3 common struggles we could overcome. First, what do we do when our students aren't sure of what to do or expect it to be done for them? 2, what do we do when our students aren't sure where to start when it comes to looking at patterns? And 3, what do we do when they're not sure of what to pay attention to in terms of the evidence to use when making a claim? So let's jump in. Takeaway number 1, step 1. Data is a process. Working with data is a process, and we have to help our students realize that. Whenever we work with data, there are 3 things that go into it. We get data, we explore data, we infer meaning from data, and most importantly for our students, that they are that key puzzle piece in the middle. This is not a sit in the back seat and passively participate. This is a upfront, actively participate, be in the driver's seat, critically think, put those thinking caps on. So helping our students see that. For us as teachers, oh yes, there are so many things that go into each of those 3 things that I just said super quickly in passing. Yes, 100%. Should we be doing all of these each time? Oh my goodness, no. We focus on a couple or one of what we're going to foreground, what we're going to have our students work on, and then all the rest go to the background. We scaffold it, we do it for them, we support it in any one given activity. And then in the next activity, we shuffle it up. And in the next activity, we shuffle it up. So across the year, they're getting practice with all of these different things. But in any one activity, we are not cognitively overloading them. A key part of them understanding that data is a process and that they are an active part of it is also realizing that while we talk about this in a linear flow of get data, explore data, infer meaning from data, very rarely is that actually the reality of how we work with data. It is not a linear process. This is not a 1, 2, 3 checklist. This is a get in, mark about, mess about, make some sense of things. So as we're making sense of these things, we thought about it, we paused and we thought okay, well, if we look at a graph, what patterns do we see? What patterns might our learners see? And you know what? Over and over again, those aren't actually the same thing. What our students see and what we see are not actually the same thing. So what? How do we go through that? Well, we took a little walk down thinking about reading. I know, not data. Bear with me. We're coming back to graphs, I promise. When we read, we first learn the letters, and then we learn which way those letters go to actually be the symbols that we use. This is an M, this is a W. That's really important. Then we piece those letters together, usually with a visual of what that is, to help our learners learn how to read those different symbols of our letters and how they go together and how that matches up with what they've been hearing for years or months on end when we're asking them to read. We do not give them Harry Potter right off the bat. We scaffold it in. We talked about how we should scaffold that in for our 5 most common data patterns as well. Do they need to know that this isn't positive or an increasing relationship or pattern? Eventually. Do they need to know that in this exact moment? Gosh, no. Let them use their own words to describe what's going on, but show them a graph either stylized like this, ideally with some arrows to give an indication of what's going on those axes, or take a graph from your local area, a news feed that showed up, and have them look at that low floor, high ceiling, giving them a way to practice that graph reading and the information of Do they actually know those common patterns? Do they know the letters before I'm asking them to read? Do they know the patterns before I'm asking them to look at a graph and make meaning of it for our content areas? Because that meaning making is where we are going. CER, claims evidence reasoning, is a structure that many of us are using now, or we ask students to come up with a conclusion, different words that we use. This comes from the world of prose. And when we're in the world of prose, we have text that we read through the prose, we read through the text, we identify the conclusion, what the evidence or examples are to support that, and the reasoning behind how that evidence supports, and we connect it out to our content. So many of our data-based activities are set up in this linear sequence as well. We've got data, we've got visuals, we're asking our students on our graphic organizers, what's your claim? What's your evidence? What's your reasoning? And then that's where it all usually tends to fall apart. And then before we can even get to the connecting to content. Well, turns out research shows it's not actually a linear sequence when we work with data. It's the intersectionality of the content, the for what, the visuals, which are the how, and the data, the with what. It's all three of those pieces coming together. And super importantly, as different some of those pieces come together, cognitively, what are we doing? We engage with the data that's on the page between the content and the visuals. We analyze the data as we're connecting the data and the visuals together of those data, and we interpret as we make sense of the data as it connects back to the content. And each of those steps cognitively, we as experts do this engage and analyze almost instantaneously, very subconsciously usually, of what's actually on the page. We jump right to this interpret of what it could mean. But if we unpack that and support our learners, then we are actually setting them up for more success of identifying their claim, pointing to the relevant pieces of evidence, and setting them up so that they can explain their reasoning of why those pieces of evidence support the particular claim that they are making from the data. So it's not the linear sequence, it's the intersectionality, it's all the connections of those different pieces coming together that sets our students up for more success with data. So there you have it. 3 steps to use before state testing, before the next unit, in this unit, in this week, next year, wherever you might be at. Remind students that working with data is a process and they're a part of it. Gut check ourselves that our students are familiar with these common data patterns. We talked about 5 on the strategy share out. There are more than 5. That is not an exhaustive list, but do your students know the pattern before you're asking them to make sense of that pattern for your content? And then finally, remembering CER with data is different cognitively than it is with prose. So how are we on-ramping? How are we setting those questions up? These are 3 strategies that we can use, helping our students get more familiar with data. There are a lot more things that go into working with data, by all means, 100%. But here's the deal. We know that you're super busy, but please stop using the square wheel. We've got round wheels. We talked about 3 of them here. There is, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more. So I invite you to book a student breakthrough session. It's a free 30 minutes where we can talk about for your students, your learners, where are you at? What are they struggling with? What is the major pain point where you're like, no matter what I do, they're not getting it? Book a call. We would love to talk to you of what are some of those things in that iceberg that we can share with you, some of those resources that you can start using with your students that you have. And just remember, building data skills, helping our students build these data skills, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're doing awesome, but make sure you've got your running shoes on, not your track spikes, because it's a long haul and we're all in it together and we're going to get our students there. So that's it. The takeaways: book your 30-minute call. The link is down below in the comments here for the video. Looking forward to connecting with you soon, and thank you for all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Have fun playing with your data.